Attack on Titan fandom was thrown for a loop when what we thought was the final episode turned out to be a cliffhanger. Now we're going to break down what happened in the season 4 finale, episode 75, Above and Below, and explain how it sets up the actual end of the series coming this winter. Now we're going to cover Zeke's current situation, Yelena's devotion, Gabi's stance on the war, and Eren's options as we get closer to the highly anticipated final showdown. But before we do all of that, we're about to dive right on into spoiler territory, so if you haven't seen episode 75, Above and Below, just yet, avert your eyes and cover your ears, because here we go. Now that we have a look at Zeke's backstory in the last episode, Soul Salvation, we're seeing the pieces come together this episode for a major confrontation. Now, at the end of that last episode, we see him making a desperate move on Levi, triggering the explosive thunder spear that was stabbed into his body. Zeke somehow survives the blast with only his chest and head remaining. Now, as he was laying there, we got a small glimpse of a girl with a headband. It must be someone important if he's thinking about her as he's slowly dying. Maybe it's his daughter. Not to mention, he still was able to control a nearby Titan to pick him up. It'll be curious to see what Zeke has planned because he'll probably still be recovering from his injuries. Now Levi, on the other hand, is nowhere to be seen. Here's hoping he's okay, and Hanji helps him out when she goes to investigate the noise with the Jaegerists. A final battle wouldn't be the same without Levi. We cut to Yelena having a meal with fellow Jaegerists and Commander Pixis. Now we find out that all the soldiers have gathered at the recently evacuated Shinganshina, which is where Eren was heading to back in episode 73.
始まりの地、志願しなくへ。
Now we also learned that Eldians are being identified by new armbands. The white armbands represent Jaegerists. The red armbands represent Eldians who learned they drank Zeke's spinal fluid wine and were forced to comply. Black armbands represent Eldians who drank the tainted wine without knowing anything else. Now it's a little weird to have that black armband. At this point, it probably makes sense to force all affected Eldians to comply, so there must be some sort of plan to utilize these different groups of spinal fluid wine drinkers. Now, Yelena mentioned, quote, the world might be saved, which wise Commander Pixis picked up on immediately. Now, it totally contradicts the initial plan of using the rumbling to deter outsiders from an island invasion. Yelena doesn't reveal the plan to Pixis, but informs Armin and the rest of the prisoners later on in the episode. Yelena probably had no use for Pixis, which is probably why Armin and the gang get the full story instead. Speaking of Armin and the prisoners, Connie suggested that Armin transform out of there, but we all know how that'll go. Jean asks about Armin and Eren's confrontation, but Mikasa chose not to share the details. Jean had a good point that Eren might have done what he did for a good reason. Now it's hard to say because Eren has changed so much. Eren was really laying the hurt on Armin and Mikasa, both physically and emotionally. Now maybe Eren is trying to distance himself because he doesn't want to drag them down a horrible path. Guess we'll learn soon enough. Now cutting back to Gabi, we see Eren trying to convince her to help flush out enemies by threatening Falco's life. Now Gabi has been very protective of Falco, so she almost looked willing to comply until Peak walked in, killing the guard. Now is Gabi second guessing her motives? Her actions have constantly been hurting Falco, and she seems to always pick his safety over her own. We get a tense standoff between Peak and Eren, but Eren easily calls Peak's bluff of killing him, making her seemingly give up on the mission. Now Peak then goes on talking about joining up with Eren. She even goes as far as disarming Gabi with very sound arguments against Marley. Eren isn't convinced, of course, so Peak suggests going to the roof to share her comrades' locations. Back to Yelena and the prisoners. Now we see Yelena telling the gang the full-on story about ending the cycle of hatred to save Eldia and the rest of the world. Zeke's euthanasian plan to kill off the Eldian race by not allowing Eldians to bear children. Yikes. Now Yelena continues saying that they can use the rumbling as a deterrent as long as the founding Titan and the royal bloodline are preserved. That's right, guys. Yes, Historia apparently is pregnant. So that's another candidate for using the founding Titan's power. We haven't seen much of her lately. Think about it, y'all. Now with Zeke on the mend, it'll be interesting to see if Historia will be used as a backup. As Yelena finishes up her explanation, Armin begins to cry. Now Armin cries a lot, we all know that, but he has an odd response saying, quote, but to think your cause was so noble. Now, it's clear that Yelena is a devout follower of Zeke and probably Eren too at this particular point. Armin's response seems to be almost sympathetic, as if he knows that Yelena has been caught in an unfortunate lie. We're back with Peak, Gabi, and Eren on their way to the roof. Now we get a quick glimpse of the crowd and you can see Porco, the Jaw Titan. Last time we saw Porco and Peak together was back in episode 70 when Reiner was trying to convince Commander Magath to initiate an immediate surprise attack. Clearly, that surprise attack is unfolding in front of us as Peak continues leading Eren to the roof. Peak chats with Eren about Zeke and how he seems to be untruthful all the years she's known him until the very day the stepbrothers met face to face 4 years prior. She remembers Zeke saying, quote, "Believe me, I know what you're going through, Eren. Someday I'm coming back to rescue you." She believes because of this, Eren would know about Zeke's secrets, but that's not the case. If it wasn't clear during Zeke's escape, Zeke can control Titans, but only if they drank his spinal fluid, from what we've seen. Now, back in episode 26, Zeke, as the Beast Titan, was trying to command a Titan from Paradise Island, but it didn't listen. Why didn't Zeke share this with Eren? Are Eren and Zeke truly on the same page? I don't know. Eren doesn't trust Peak, of course, but that note is kind of a red flag for an alliance. Now that Peak and Eren are finally on the roof, it's time for Peak to prove her loyalty. Eren asks Peak where the enemies are, and she points right back at Eren, just as he did in the final episode of season 3 when referring to taking out his enemies. All that talk about joining Eren was apparently just BS on Peak's end. Just as she was pointing to Eren, the Jaw Titan crashes through the floor beneath Eren in an attempt to eat him. The Jaw Titan only manages to get Eren's legs, of course, allowing him to transform into the Attack Titan. As the surprise attack unfolds, Marleyan airships descend on Shiganshina with Reiner on board. The final battle is here. What was supposed to be a finale ended up being a meaty episode for setting up the characters for some major decisions down the road. Zeke is going to have to pull off some miracles if he intends to have a say in the final showdown. Armin and the gang now know the truth of it all. Does it change their thoughts about Eren? Will they act differently? You know, Eren must have some sort of plan ready and waiting. He doesn't seem to trust anybody, and that most likely includes Zeke too. Now maybe he'll use Historia instead of Zeke. Maybe Annie and the female Titan will finally jump back into action. So many possibilities on the verge of a decisive battle. What an episode to keep us on our toes. Now don't get me wrong, y'all. I'm glad we're getting more Attack on Titan to flesh out the conclusion to this epic story, but it's going to be a doozy of a wait for this winter, considering where we're leaving off. You know, let us know what you're looking forward to in Attack on Titan episode 76 and what you thought about this week's episode. For more on anime, check out our top 10 most anticipated anime of 2021 and the list of anime coming to Netflix in 2021, just in case you missed it. And for everything else, keep it locked right here on IGN.